telling them how to run their programs. And more importantly, they weren't being run well. And that's really what the government wanted to do something about. So they had decided they wanted to restructure, bring the power to the national level, remove it from the provincial level, and rework their programs. And so I spent a couple of years in South Africa working with a task force of very high-level people in the national government to design that system, design that change, help write the legislation to create a new Social Security agency similar to HHS in Washington, and the Social Security kind of all wrapped up into one, but to create a whole new national department, which is what they wanted. So I helped work on that, draft the legislation. I got to participate actually in the parliamentary process, which was very interesting. This is a country with 45 million people. Their parliament is 400 members in the lower house and then 90 in the upper house, which is called the Council of Provinces. And they don't have any staff on their committees. They have, that's an exaggeration. They have one staff on their committee. And that staff person basically makes sure that the Xerox copies are made of whatever the papers are. And so working through that process, getting the legislation passed and setting up an implementation team, all of which was fascinating work. I don't know how much the fact that I was a female, a white person, an American, or / foreigner, but particularly an American, as time went on while I was there, it became less and less popular. And but it took a long time to get to a level of trust. But when I was able to, I was included in incredible, high-level conversations and decision-making processes about the way that they wanted to go. And so I'm going to stop there because I've talked too long. You didn't give me a signal.
You're doing fine.
And take questions. I could tell you all kinds of other things. I did make a presentation about South Africa and some of the work I did once before here, so maybe some of you heard that, or I'll do it some other time. But I do want to take questions if any of that raises questions, issues, thoughts.
Do we have any questions?
You mentioned you had changed different jobs, different locations. So how did you manage moving and settling in different places, and then actually getting to work? Was that a big challenge in your career?
Well, the older you get, the harder it is. Basically, you don't accumulate a lot of stuff because you always are thinking about how many boxes you need to move it. But in the case of like going to South Africa, they moved me there. I mean, I did nothing. They came in and boxed it up and sent it, and I just had to arrange to get my dog to go with me over there, which was not a small event. But going and living other places, I'm very much an Austin person. I've been here now since 1972, and it's home, and I've always thought of it as such, and I think it will remain such. And so the moving part of it is a challenge, but you just have to jump in. I mean, it's very hard to make friends in places like South Africa. Very difficult. And a lot of the reason that they wanted me to stay a fourth year, and I didn't stay a fourth year, predominantly because of crime issues. That's just so exhausting that at some point it's just, you just figure your odds are getting worse and worse every day that you're there. That something will happen to you because you've known so many people that have had things happen. But I socialized a lot with the people I worked with, frankly. And to some extent, some of the Americans who I had met over at the embassy. But I was the only person not in the embassy. I literally had an office in the National Treasury and got up and went to work there every day and was escorted from the parking to the building by guards and things like that. So is that answering your question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so to be successful in a career in public service, it's part of the trade to be able to move easily between places.
Not necessarily. I mean, I have friends here who have been here, who started in the LBB, made a career in the Legislative Budget Board, had a fantastic career, had great influence. Billy Hamilton, who was here, Craig Peterson, who was here, Susan Reef, who was here before, did move and went back and forth to Washington a couple of times. So it really depends on what you want to do. But you know, I always wanted to be part of change that was happening to try to make things better, as opposed to thinking of myself as I'm a budget person. I was more interested in trying to go where I thought I could make some kind of difference, even if I ended up not doing it. Yes, sir.
Could you give us any advice on how to balance the loyalty to the party and your professionalism, as we're just telling about this bill? It was more a party thing than a professional thing to get care for all the people, because sometimes it's hard when you're in public service.
It's very hard, and you know, I've never worked for any party per se, but I have a philosophy that is usually better reflected in the Democratic side of the ledger than the Republican. I worked for Pete Domenici in the United States Senate, who's a Republican. Some of that just has to do with whether, I mean, to me, the judgment is, are these people who are trying to get to a place that I want to try to help to get to, in terms of policy. But that night, you know, when we won that indigent care fight, there was a big party in the governor's office, and I got to tell you, I was so disillusioned from that experience, because it had been such a great experience up until the end, and then when we went into special session, and suddenly it wasn't about poor people getting health care, and it wasn't about how counties are going to be funded or protected in what they have to put forward for indigent care. All of the issues went away. None of that mattered anymore. What mattered was a partisan political issue, and it became one of those kinds of fights. And at the end of the evening, when there was champagne in the governor's office, and you know, the lieutenant governor, everybody had stopped by, and it was just a great celebration. Everybody was happy, and I went into the governor's office. This was in his office, where I went into the area where his desk is, and I picked up the phone. It was like 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, and I called Barbara Jordan, and I said, Barbara, you know, we won. And she goes, I know, I heard, I saw it on the news. Congratulations, you must be feeling great. And I said, I don't feel great. I am so disappointed that this wasn't, you know, people did this for all the wrong reasons. The wrong reasons. That's what I said. You know, they didn't care about poor people and let me get off, you know, I went off on this little, not a tirade, but, you know, I went off on that level, on that angle of it. And there was this silence, and Barbara goes, DeAnn? And she said, are poor people going to get health care as a result of this? And I said, yes. And she goes, they passed the bill the way that it would have been passed before? And I said, yes. And she goes, well, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why people do things. And I think that's really important. It's a lesson that I learned, which is you make your agreements with people, you make your coalitions with people. There may be many, many reasons why somebody's doing something. As long as you keep your eye on the goal or the prize, you can stay in there. Otherwise, you need to really go be an advocate. And I've been an advocate. I love being an advocate. I love being an advocate. I love doing coalitions and organizing and putting together press conferences and things. But you know what? You don't have the same ability to make a difference hands-on like you do if you get to be in government and you're getting to work on things that you believe in. So the way I see it is, I don't care which party a person is if they're trying to get somewhere in the general vicinity. If you're being directionally correct, if you're making progress, then I think that's the way you have to do it. I mean, Barbara used to say, slog it out, grind it out, stick with it. You know, it's not pretty and it is not glorious. And every once in a while you get to win. Does that help answer?
Yeah, and I actually had a question and a comment. I guess the question is, you talked about that you had left after the 3 years and there was a possible 4th year. So it sounds like there was still some work that needed to be done with the system
absolutely.
Before you left. But I was curious if you would know, I assume you would know this, but in doing, you know, in recreating the system and kind of even creating, I guess, some of it from scratch, if they kind of put some type of evaluation